The city died in silence. Hive Calvessus had stood for 10,000 years, a monument to imperial endurance, its spires clawing at polluted skies, its foundries churning out munitions for wars across the segmentum solar. 17 billion souls crammed into hab blocks that stretched from bedrock to stratosphere, their lives spent in service to the God Emperor's endless crusade. Then the star fell. It was not a star. Inquisitor Kael Veritas would understand this later when he reviewed the Pixty footage from orbital surveyors. The object that punctured real space above Calvessus moved with purpose, trailing no engine wash, no warp signatures. It simply was a humanoid figure wreathed in cosmic radiation, its form a negative space filled with swirling nebulae and dying light. The impact vaporized Sector Quintus instantaneously. 17 square kilometers of industrial sprawl converted to superheated plasma. The shockwave that followed killed another 3 million in collapsing hab towers and ruptured reactors. But it was the silence after that truly terrified. No screams, no Vox traffic, no life sign returns from the impact crater. The augurs showed only a spreading dead zone radiation levels, climbing past lethal thresholds into measurements that made even hardened tech priests pale. And at the center, something stood upright. Kael Veritas had served the Ordo Hereticus for 43 years. He had burned witch cults on Meridian 4, executed corrupt cardinals. On Ophelius 7, watched worlds die beneath exterminatus bombardment. His faith in the Emperor was absolute, his conviction unshakable. The thing in the crater made him doubt. Enhance thermal overlay. He ordered his augmetic eye clicking through spectra as he studied the hololith projection, the righteous vengeance. His commandeered strike cruiser hung in low orbit above the devastation. "Give me a clear image." The servitor complied with mechanical precision. The hololith sharpened, resolving into a figure that should not exist. It was humanoid, roughly 2 meters tall, but its form defied easy categorization. The body appeared simultaneously organic and cosmic muscle tissue that rippled like stellar gas bone structure, visible through translucent skin that contained entire galaxies in miniature. Where eyes should have been twin points of absolute darkness stared back at the surveyor drones. "Abomination," Kael whispered. He had seen many horrors spat forth from the warp, but this was different. It carried no taint of chaos, no psychic residue, yet the ambient radiation it emitted was killing everything within a 3-kilometer radius. "My lord," Captain Theron spoke from behind him, "I have received confirmation. The Ultramarines 4th Company can deploy within the hour. Brother Sergeant Cassius requests permission to lead the purge." Kael did not look away from the hololith. The figure had begun to move, walking with deliberate steps through the ash-choked streets. Survivors fled before it, those lucky enough to be beyond the radiation kill zone. Some collapsed after mere seconds of proximity, their bodies succumbing to cellular breakdown. "Deploy them," Kael said quietly. "But Theron, tell them to expect casualties." Garou walked through the ruins and felt nothing. This was not his world. These were not his people. The Zero Punch had thrown him beyond reality itself, beyond the multiverse. He knew into this place of endless war and false gods. He could taste the lies in the air, the devotion of billions poured into a corpse on a golden throne, prayers that fed nothing but delusion. It reminded him of the Hero Association, just larger, just more grotesque. A group of armored giants emerged from the smoke ahead. 9 of them, their ceramite plate painted in blue and gold, each standing taller than any human had right to be. Enhanced, modified, made into living weapons for their so-called emperor. The one in front raised a bolter, a crude weapon that fired explosive projectiles. Garou's cosmic awareness cataloged its function in microseconds, mass reactive rounds designed to penetrate and detonate inside the target, effective against most opponents, not against him. "In the name of the God Emperor!" The warrior's voice boomed through Vox grills. "You are judged abominations. Surrender yourself, for Garou moved." The water stream rock smashing fist had been Master Bang's ultimate technique. A martial art that redirected enemy attacks, turned strength against itself, found the fatal flaw in any defense. Garou had mastered it, evolved it, made it his own. Now he applied it against Space Marines. The first warrior fired. Garou's hand swept up, fingers brushing the massive bolt round as it left the barrel. The touch was gentle, precise, adjusting trajectory by micro-degrees, sending the explosive back along its original path. The round detonated inside the bolter's chamber. The Space Marine's hands disintegrated. He stumbled back, shock overwhelming his enhanced physiology. Garou was already moving to the second target. This one swung a chainsword, a brutal weapon designed to tear through armor and flesh. Garou observed the warrior's stance, the micro-adjustments of weight distribution, the neural firing patterns that preceded each strike. He mimicked them. His own strike came faster. Where the Space Marine had spent years drilling combat doctrine into enhanced reflexes, Garou simply understood. His palm caught the warrior's gorget joint, the one weak point where neck met chest plate. The ceramite cracked. The warrior's head snapped back at an impossible angle. "Scatter formation!" the sergeant bellowed. "Suppressing fire!" They didn't get to finish the command. Garou moved through their formation like water through stone. Each movement was economy itself, no wasted motion, no excessive force. A redirect here, sending a Space Marine's power fist into his battle brother's chest plate. A precise strike there, severing the connection between helmet and armor, exposing vulnerable flesh to the superheated air. The enhanced warriors fought with discipline that would have overwhelmed any conventional opponent. They covered firing lanes, coordinated overwatch, maintained tactical cohesion, even as their numbers dwindled. It didn't matter. Garou had already learned their patterns. His body had adapted, evolved beyond what they could comprehend. He moved with their precision, but possessed none of their limitations. Where they were constrained by training and augmentation, he simply was. The last Space Marine, Brother Sergeant Cassius, stood alone amid the corpses of his squad. His armor was cracked, his left arm hanging useless, but his bolter remained steady, aimed at Garou's center mass. "What are you?" Cassius asked. Not a challenge, a genuine question. Garou met his gaze. Those cosmic voids where his eyes should have been seemed to pull at reality itself. "Time to conduct evil." The bolter fired. Garou's hand caught the round mid-flight cosmic radiation, already destabilizing its explosive core. He crushed it into powder and dust. Then he moved. The reinforcements arrived 12 minutes later. Brother Dreadnought Thalion led them, an ancient warrior entombed in a walking sarcophagus of adamantium and faith. 2 full tactical squads followed, 40 Space Marines in perfect formation. Heavy bolters, plasma cannons, assault cannons that could shred tanks. They found Cassius alive but unconscious, his armor breached in 17 places. The rest of his squad had been disassembled, not torn apart in rage, but methodically dismantled as if by a surgeon studying anatomy. Garou stood in the center of the carnage, waiting. "Target acquired," Thalion's Vox horn thundered across the ruined hab blocks. "All units concentrated fire for the Emperor." 80 warriors opened fire as one. The storm of explosive rounds, plasma bolts, and laser fire converged on a single point. The ground beneath Garou's feet vaporized. The air itself ignited from the sheer concentrated violence. When the barrage ceased, nothing remained but a crater glowing with residual heat. The Space Marines held formation weapons ready, scanning for life signs. Garou stood exactly where he had been, not a mark on him. The cosmic radiation surrounding his form had simply absorbed everything, converted matter and energy into more of itself. He had not even needed to dodge. "Impressive," Garou said quietly. His voice carried despite the distance, despite the Vox interference. But insufficient. He raised one hand. The cosmic energy that comprised his being began to concentrate, collapsing inward like a dying star. The temperature spiked. Augurs screamed warnings. Nuclear fission. Garou had learned this technique from understanding the fundamental forces that governed existence. In his reality, he had glimpsed the knowledge of God itself, the ability to manipulate matter at its most basic level, to split atoms, to unleash the binding forces that held reality together. Now, in this new universe of endless war, he would demonstrate what true power, for the MP. Thalion's battle cry cut short. The explosion consumed everything within a 5-kilometer radius. It was not fire. It was not plasma. It was nuclear fury unleashed at ground level, a miniature sun born and dying in the span of a heartbeat. Ceramide armor melted like wax. Adamantium endoskeletons sublimated into vapor. Even Thalion's dreadnought chassis built to withstand orbital bombardment simply ceased to exist. The shockwave flattened hab blocks for 30 kilometers in every direction. The mushroom cloud rose into Calvesis's polluted atmosphere, a pillar of ash and death visible from orbit. When the light faded, Garou stood at the center of a glass crater, his form unchanged, unbothered by the devastation he had wrought. From orbit, Kael Veritas watched the world burn. "The walking apocalypse," he whispered, his augmetic eye recording every detail for the inquisitorial archives. This would go to the High Lords, to the chapter masters, perhaps even to the throne itself. An abomination had come to the Imperium, one that killed without rage, without corruption, without even visible effort. "My lord." Theron's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "What are your orders?" Kael closed his eyes. 43 years of service, 43 years of absolute certainty in the Emperor's protection. All of it meaningless before this thing. "Send word to Terra," he said finally. "Mark this world for exterminatus consideration. And Theron." He opened his eyes, staring at the mushroom cloud still rising from Calvesis's surface. "Pray that the Emperor is watching, because we're going to need a miracle." In the ruins of Hive Calvesis, among the dead and the dying survivors gathered. They had watched the armored giants fall. They had seen the nuclear fire that should have killed them as well, but somehow left them untouched beyond the immediate blast radius. They had witnessed something impossible. A woman knelt first. Her face was burned, her clothing ash-stained, but her eyes held something Kael would have recognized immediately: faith. Not faith in the Emperor, faith in something else. "The walking God," she whispered. Others took up the chant, kneeling one by one. "The destroyer, the liberator." Garou stood before them, confusion flickering across his cosmic features. This was wrong. This was wrong. He was supposed to be the monster, the villain, the absolute evil that forced unity through fear. Why were they worshiping him? "I am not your God," he said, his voice flat, denying what he saw in their eyes. But they did not listen. could not listen. In a universe of endless suffering, they had found something that defied the Imperium, that killed its angels without mercy, that stood untouched by weapons that could shatter worlds. They had found their salvation in evil itself. Garou turned away from them, walking toward the horizon where smoke still rose from ruined spires. Behind him, the first seeds of the cult of absolute evil took root in desperate hearts. He had wanted to be the monster that united worlds against him. Instead, he had become their god. The irony was not lost on him, but understanding it changed nothing. In the warp where reality and nightmare merged, four ancient powers stirred. Khorne, seated on his brass throne, felt the echoes of perfect violence. No rage, no excess, just pure, efficient destruction. Tzeentch, weaving his impossible schemes, perceived a pattern he had not foreseen, a thread from outside reality itself. Nurgle, content in his garden of decay, sensed something that could not be corrupted, could not be claimed. Slaanesh, hungering for perfection, tasted a being that had transcended its own limitations. They did not yet understand what had entered their domain, but they knew with the certainty of gods that something had changed. In the Imperium, Inquisitor Kael Veritas prepared his reports, his hands shaking slightly as he wrote the words that would send shockwaves through the Imperium. An abomination unlike any recorded has manifested on Calvesis. It demonstrates capabilities beyond conventional classification. It kills without corruption. It speaks of evil as one might speak of purpose. I believe we are witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. I recommend immediate mobilization of all available assets. This entity must be contained or destroyed before it can spread its influence. But I fear we may already be too late. Above Calvesis, the warp churned reality itself, distorting around the presence that had never been meant to exist in this universe. Cosmic Garou stood in the ruins of a city he had destroyed, surrounded by those who now called him savior, and felt the weight of his twisted ideal pressing down upon him. He had wanted to be absolute evil. The universe was about to grant his wish, but not in any way he could have imagined. Garou left Calvesis burning behind him. The void welcomed him with cold indifference. No air, no gravity, no life. Just the endless dark between stars, the kind of emptiness that would kill any normal being in seconds. But Garou was no longer bound by such limitations. His cosmic form required nothing. No oxygen, no warmth, no sustenance. He simply existed, a walking violation of natural law. Below, the hive world continued its death throes. Firestorms consumed entire continents. The survivors of the initial devastation now turned on each other, some forming cults in Garou's name, others desperately clinging to imperial doctrine. Kael Veritas watched it all from orbit, his reports growing more urgent with each passing hour. But Garou paid none of it attention. His cosmic awareness had detected something else, a distortion in space itself, a wound in reality that pulsed with malevolent intelligence, a warp storm. In his old universe, Garou had learned to sense the flow of energy, to read the invisible currents that governed existence. Here, in this new reality, he felt something similar, but fundamentally wrong. The warp was not natural. It was emotion given form, madness crystallized into quasi-existence. It was everything he despised about the Hero Association's false ideals, magnified to cosmic scale. And it was pulling him in. Garou didn't resist. If this universe had gods, he would meet them. He would show them what true evil looked like. The transition was immediate and nauseating. One moment, Garou floated in the sterile void of real space. The next, he stood in a landscape that defied physics and sanity in equal measure. The ground beneath his feet was made of screaming faces. The sky above bled colors that had no names. Structures rose in impossible geometries, their angles attacking the mind itself. The warp. The Imperium. The place where humanity's darkest emotions took physical form. Garou's cosmic radiation flared instinctively, creating a sphere of stable reality around him. Where his power touched the warp, it recoiled like flesh from flame. Demons materialized in the distance, lesser entities drawn to this intrusion, this thing that did not belong. They came in waves. Bloodletters of Khorne, their brass swords raised high. Pink horrors of Tzeentch cackling with manic glee. Plague-bearers of Nurgle trailing pestilence. Demonettes of Slaanesh moving with hypnotic grace. They lasted seconds. The first bloodletter lunged its demon blade, aimed at Garou's throat. He caught the weapon mid-swing, his fingers closing around the brass edge. The blade screamed, actually screamed as cosmic radiation ate through its substance. The demon followed, dissolving into non-existence before it could even register surprise. The others fared no better. Garou moved through their ranks like a surgeon, each strike precise and final. He was learning their patterns, cataloging their movements, understanding the way warp entities fought. They relied on fear, on madness, on the psychological warfare that shattered mortal minds. None of it worked on him. "Interesting," Garou said to the empty air. "You're weaker than I expected. Is this all your gods can manage?" The warp answered. The bloodthirster that emerged from a tear in reality stood 5 meters tall, its body a mass of muscle and brass armor wings that blotted out the bleeding sky. This was no lesser demon. This was a greater demon of Khorne, a fragment of the blood god's own fury given form. "Khorne sees you." Its voice was thunder and rage incarnate. "Warrior without hate, killer without passion, the blood god offers you a place at his throne. Accept, and you shall lead his legions. Refuse, and I shall take your skull as tribute." Garou studied the creature. Its fighting stance was aggressive, forward-weighted, optimized for overwhelming force. No finesse, no technique, just pure distilled violence. He could work with that. "Your god is welcome to try," Garou said. The bloodthirster charged. Its first swing would have cleaved a battle titan in half. The demon's axe moved faster than sound-trailing fire and the screams of 10,000 murdered souls. Garou met it head-on, not with a dodge, not with a deflection, with raw force. His fist crashed into the axe blade and the warp itself seemed to pause. The cosmic radiation surrounding Garou's form converted the demon weapon's momentum into heat, into light, into nothing. The axe shattered. The bloodthirster stumbled, confusion flickering across its bestial features. Garou had already copied its style. He moved forward with the same aggressive intensity, the same overwhelming pressure, but refined it. Where the daemon was all rage, Garou was controlled fury. Where it was mindless violence, he was precise destruction. His palm strike caught the bloodthirster in the chest. Ribs, demon ribs that could withstand artillery fire, cracked and collapsed. The creature tried to recover, tried to summon the blood god's blessing. Garou's follow-up strike removed its head from its shoulders. The greater demon dissolved its essence, screaming back into the warp. But Garou barely noticed. He was already adapting, already evolving. The Bloodthirster's style of pure aggression was now part of his repertoire, another tool in an ever-expanding arsenal. One down. A new voice echoed through the twisted landscape, this one sibilant and mocking. But Khorne was always the simplest of us. Let us see how you fare against change itself. The Lord of Change materialized gradually, its form never quite solidifying into a single shape. One moment it appeared as a bird creature of impossible colors, the next as a mass of eyes and mouths, then as something that had no analog in any sane reality. A greater demon of Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the changer of ways. Tzeentch has watched your arrival with great interest. The daemon's voice shifted between 1,000 different tones. You evolve, you adapt, you change with each battle. This pleases the great conspirator. Accept his gift of infinite knowledge, and all futures shall be yours to command. Garou observed the daemon carefully. Unlike the Bloodthirster, this one had no fixed combat style. Each movement was different from the last. Each attack came from an unexpected angle. It fought with the unpredictability of true chaos, never repeating, never settling into a pattern. That was its weakness. Your god deals in lies, Garou said. Knowledge that comes with strings attached, power that enslaves. I've seen this before, organizations that promise strength but deliver only chains. The Lord of Change laughed, a sound like shattering glass and distant thunder. Oh, but you are becoming a god yourself, whether you acknowledge it or not. The mortals already worship you. The warp stirs at your presence. Deny it all you wish. Tzeentch sees what you will become. The demon attacked, and Garou understood its strategy immediately. It was trying to overwhelm him with unpredictability to make each exchange completely different from the last. Against a normal opponent, this would be devastating. But Garou had already fought Saitama, a being who shattered every expectation, who broke every rule. Compared to that, a demon's tricks were transparent. He stopped trying to predict. Instead, he matched chaos with chaos. His fighting style transformed mid-combat. One strike came with the brutal directness he'd copied from Khorne's demon. The next, twisted into something serpentine, borrowed from his old water stream technique. Then a feint drawn from his observations of the Space Marines. Then something entirely new synthesized from all his accumulated knowledge. The Lord of Change tried to adapt a counter to outchange the changer. But Garou was already 3 moves ahead, his cosmic awareness processing probabilities faster than even Tzeentch's demon could scheme. His final strike was simplicity itself. A straight punch delivered with nuclear fission-enhanced force directly through the daemon's ever-shifting core. The Lord of Change exploded into 1,000 screaming fragments, each one dissolving as it scattered across the warp. Garou stood alone in the twisted landscape, his form now incorporating elements from both battles. The pure aggression of Khorne, the unpredictable adaptation of Tzeentch. He was becoming something unprecedented, a synthesis of everything he encountered, stripped of weakness, refined to absolute efficiency. And the warp noticed. They came together not as physical manifestations, but as presence, 4 overwhelming forces that pressed against reality itself. Khorne, the blood god, a mountain of brass and rage. Tzeentch, the architect, a labyrinth of schemes and possibilities. Nurgle, the plague father, an ocean of decay and endurance. Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, a symphony of excess and perfection. The 4, the ruinous powers, The chaos gods themselves. You are war. Horn's voice shook the ground. You are change. Tzeentch's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You are endurance. Nurgle's voice was gentle, almost kind. You are perfection. Slaanesh voice promised ecstasy. Join us. Become the fifth. Ascend. Garou felt their offers like physical weight. They were offering him everything, power beyond measure, dominion over reality itself, the chance to shape existence according to his will. They saw what he was becoming, saw the potential for a new chaos god to emerge, and they wanted to claim him first. For a moment, just a moment, Garou felt the temptation, the raw power they represented. The ability to truly become absolute evil on a scale that dwarfed anything he'd imagined. Then he remembered the Hero Association, the false promises, the corruption disguised as justice, the system that elevated some while crushing others, all while pretending to serve the greater good. These gods were no different. Larger, yes, more powerful, certainly. But fundamentally the same parasites feeding on worship, growing fat on belief, demanding submission in exchange for strength. No. The word echoed through the warp with unexpected force. Garou's cosmic radiation flared, pushing back against the divine presences. You're not gods, you're emotions that learn to think. You're the collective delusions of trillions, given form by their faith and fear. You're exactly what I fought against in my old universe, false idols pretending to be salvation. I don't serve gods. I don't bow to anyone. I am absolute evil, and that means I stand alone. The warp screamed. The four recoiled, not in fear, but in recognition. This being this cosmic aberration was something outside their schemes, beyond their control. It could not be corrupted, because it had already embraced corruption on its own terms. It could not be tempted because it wanted nothing they could offer. And most dangerous of all, it was beginning to attract worship on its own. In the depths of the warp, among the tides of emotion and madness, something stirred. Mortals who had heard whispers of Garou's power, demons who had witnessed his rejection of the four, cultists who saw in him a fifth path, something beyond the traditional chaos. The cult of absolute evil was taking root even here. You will regret this, the four spoke as one. You cannot escape what you are becoming. Deny us now, you will beg to join us later. Garou turned away from them, walking back toward the tier and reality that would lead him out of the warp. His cosmic form had changed subtly, harder to define, more fluid, incorporating elements from everything he'd encountered. He had wanted to be the monster that united worlds against him. Instead, he was becoming the god he despised. The irony still wasn't lost on him, but now it carried a weight of inevitability he hadn't felt before. When Garou emerged from the warp storm, he found himself in the void between stars once more. Behind him, the tear in reality slowly closed, but not before releasing a pulse of corrupted energy into the Imperium. Inquisitor Kael, still monitoring from orbit around Calvisus, detected the pulse immediately. His augmetic eye recorded something that made his blood run cold. In the warp's wake, scattered across a dozen nearby systems, psychers began to scream. They reported visions not of the traditional four, but of something else. A fifth presence, a darkness that stood apart from chaos itself. They called it many names: the walking god, the cosmic evil, the unaligned. But the name that spread fastest, whispered in terror and reverence alike, was simpler: absolute evil. Kael's hands shook as he updated his report. The entity has rejected chaos but left corruption in its wake. A new cult is forming, one that worships neither the Emperor nor the ruinous powers. Immediate intervention required before he never finished the sentence. His augmetic eye suddenly registered a new reading. Something massive, something ancient, something hungry. In the cold dark between stars, the shadow in the warp had noticed Garou's cosmic presence. The Tyranids were coming. The void should have been empty. Garou drifted through the dark between stars, his cosmic form unchanged, unbothered by the absence of everything that sustained normal life. Around him, the scattered debris of the warp storm still dissipated, fading echoes of chaos energy returning to the Imperium. He had rejected the gods, walked away from their offers of power and dominion. He should have felt satisfied, vindicated even. Instead, he felt nothing. The radiation his body emitted painted the darkness in shades of death. Any ship that came within 100,000 kilometers would find its crew dying of cellular collapse. Any planet he visited would become a graveyard. He was a walking extinction event, too dangerous for coexistence, too powerful for containment. Exactly what he had wanted to become. The absolute evil that forced unity through fear. So why did it feel so hollow? Then the darkness moved. It was subtle at first, a wrongness in the void, a sensation of being watched by something vast and patient. Garou's cosmic awareness flared, scanning the emptiness. His perception, honed through countless battles and evolved beyond mortal limits, detected it immediately. The shadow in the warp. It wasn't chaos, wasn't the twisted emotion made real of the Imperium. This was something else, a silence that smothered psychic phenomena, a darkness that consumed light and thought in equal measure. And it was spreading, growing, converging on his position from multiple vectors. Garou almost smiled. Finally, something new, aboard the righteous vengeance. Inquisitor Kyle Veritas stared at his augur displays with growing horror. "Emperor, preserve us," he whispered. The readings were unmistakable. A hive fleet, not a splinter, not a tendril, a full fleet, tens of thousands of bioships strong, their living hulls pulsing with alien hunger. They had changed course, abandoning whatever target they'd been pursuing, drawn like predators to wounded prey. Drawn to Garou. "My lord," Captain Theron said, his voice tight, "we should retreat to the Mandeville Point if that fleet reaches us." "They're not interested in us," Kale interrupted. His augmetic eyes zoomed in on the tactical display, watching the Tyranid swarm coalesce around a single point in space. Around the cosmic anomaly that had destroyed Calvesis, rejected chaos itself, and now stood alone in the void. "They want him," Kale said quietly. "The hive mind sees him as what, a threat, a resource. Does it matter?" Theron asked. Kyle didn't answer. He simply watched his fingers moving across the data slate, recording everything. Whatever happened next would reshape the Imperium's understanding of both threats. They came like a living storm. Gargoyles first, millions of them, winged horrors that chittered and screamed as they descended from the bioships. Their flesh guns spat acid and bone spikes, saturating the space around Garou with projectiles that would have shredded fleet formations. Garou stood motionless, letting them come. The first wave struck his cosmic radiation field and simply dissolved. Flesh cooked. Chitin-cracked biomatter broke down at the molecular level. They died by the thousands, their corpses floating in expanding clouds of organic debris. But more kept coming. Hormagaunts followed, ground assault organisms adapted for void combat, their talons raking across empty space. as they tried to close distance. Termagants with their symbiotic weapons. Gargoyles coordinating attack patterns with perfect synchronization. They fought with no fear, no hesitation, no self-preservation instinct. Just the driving imperative of the hive mind: consume, adapt, evolve. Garou began to move. His first strikes were experimental testing. The water stream rock smashing fist, the technique that redirected enemy force, proved useless. These creatures didn't attack with technique or form. They simply swarmed, overwhelming through numbers and coordination. So he adapted. The aggressive brutality he'd copied from Khorne's demon, the unpredictable variation from Tzeentch's servant. He combined them, flowing between styles, with each strike crushing Tyranids with efficient, economical violence. But they were learning too. Garou noticed it after the first 1,000 kills. The creatures were adjusting their approach vectors, attacking from angles he'd left exposed in previous exchanges. The hive mind was analyzing his patterns, cataloging his responses, sharing data across the entire swarm. They were evolving in real time, just like he did. Interesting, Garou said to the void. He watched them closely now, not just fighting, but studying. How they moved without verbal communication. How they coordinated across vast distances. How they adapted to environmental factors instantaneously: void combat radiation, his cosmic energy adjusting faster than should be possible. It was evolution, yes, but hollow, empty. These creatures had no will of their own, no individual purpose. They were cells in a larger organism, tools wielded by the Gestalt intelligence that puppeted them. Evolution without soul. Garou's fist clenched. His cosmic energy surged. Nuclear fission, but different this time. Not a single explosion, but dozens of smaller detonations, each one precisely calibrated. They spread through the swarm like a constellation of dying stars, creating a web of destruction that consumed entire clusters of Tyranids. The survivors adapted again. New organisms emerged from the bio-ship's creatures with heat-resistant carapaces, with flesh that absorbed radiation, with biological shielding against nuclear fire. The hive mind was learning from him, taking his techniques, his power, and creating counters at a terrifying pace. Garou felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in this universe: anticipation. The hive tyrant emerged from the largest bioship, and the swarm parted before it like water. This was no mindless drone. Hive tyrant Xylogo stood 4 meters tall, its 4 arms ending in massive bone swords that crackled with psychic energy. Its carapace bore the scars of 1,000 battles, chitin plates layered in organic armor that had evolved through countless feeding cycles. It was an apex predator given form, a fragment of the hive mind's will made manifest in flesh, and it looked at Garou with something approaching recognition. The first strike came faster than thought. The tyrant's bone swords swept in from multiple angles, each blade moving independently, coordinated by alien neural pathways. No wasted motion, no telegraphed intent, pure predatory efficiency. Garou met them all. His blocks weren't defensive. They were counterattacks, redirecting the massive blades while simultaneously striking at joint connections, at the micro gaps in the tyrant's armor, at the neural clusters that controlled its limbs. But the creature didn't fight like the Space Marines or the demons. It fought like an animal. No technique, no form, just raw instinct honed by millions of years of evolution. Each attack flowed naturally from the last, building momentum, creating openings, forcing Garou to constantly adjust. And slowly, subtly, Garou found himself copying that style. His movements became more fluid, less rigid. Where he had relied on martial technique, the structured precision of Bang's teachings, he now incorporated something more primal. The hunting instinct. The predator's awareness of prey, of weakness, of the perfect moment to strike. The tyrant sensed it. Through whatever connection linked it to the hive mind, it recognized what was happening. This opponent was learning from them, just as they learned from it. The difference was speed. Garou evolved faster. His palm strike caught the tyrant in its thorax, cosmic radiation channeled into a focused point. Bone cracked. The creature staggered, its psychic presence flickering. But it didn't fall. Its flesh was already regenerating, adapting, reinforcing the damaged area with denser tissue. "You evolve through consumption," Garou said, his voice cold, "through adding what you devour to your collective. That's not real evolution, that's just accumulation." He moved in close, past the sweeping bone swords, into the tyrant's guard. His fists blurred, not with superhuman speed, but with perfect economy. Each strike targeted a different neural cluster, disrupting the creature's coordination, breaking its connection to the hive mind piece by piece. Real evolution happens alone, when you have no one to rely on, when you must surpass your limits or die, when every battle forces you to become something more than you were. The final strike was simple. A straight punch enhanced with nuclear fission delivered directly through the tyrant's skull. The creature's head exploded in a spray of biomatter and psychic backlash. Its massive body collapsed, twitching as the hive mind's connection severed. Garou stood over the corpse, breathing steadily, analyzing what he'd learned. The tyrantid's fighting style was now part of him, the predatory instinct, the perfect coordination of limbs, the ability to adjust tactics mid-combat based on sensory feedback. He had synthesized it, combined it with everything else he'd absorbed: space marine precision, chaos, unpredictability. His own martial foundation. He was becoming something unprecedented, something that incorporated the strengths of everything he encountered while shedding their weaknesses. But the swarm wasn't finished. More hive tyrants emerged. Warriors, carnifexes, larger organisms, more dangerous, each one a different attempt by the hive mind to find a solution to the Garou problem. They came in waves, coordinated, relentless, and each wave was slightly better than the last, faster adaptation. Better counters, organisms specifically engineered to exploit perceived weaknesses in his fighting style. For the first time since arriving in this universe, Garou felt pressure, not fear, not even concern, but genuine challenge. The hive mind was matching him, evolution for evolution, adaptation for adaptation. For every technique he developed, they created a counter. For every increase in power, they bred resistance. It was exhilarating and terrifying, because Garou could see the logical endpoint. If this continued, if the hive mind learned everything from him, they would become unstoppable. His techniques, his power, his evolutionary capability, all of it would be theirs. The swarm would transcend, become something that combined tyrannid resilience with cosmic-level abilities. He had to end this now, had to evolve beyond what they could track, beyond what they could counter. Garou closed his eyes metaphorically, as his cosmic form no longer had eyes in the traditional sense, and reached inward. All his accumulated knowledge, all the styles he'd copied, all the power he'd synthesized, he let them merge, blend, become something entirely new. When he opened his awareness again, he had changed. His fighting style was no longer recognizable as any one technique. It incorporated the water stream's redirection, the whirlwind's cutting force, the aggression of chaos, the predatory instinct of tyrannids, all flowing together in a seamless whole that shifted with each exchange. He called it, in a moment of dark humor, the Monster Calamity Evolution Fist. Every strike was evolution, every movement adapted. Every exchange made him stronger, faster, more efficient. He was becoming the living embodiment of his ideal, the perfect monster, the absolute evil that transcended all categories. The nuclear fission that accompanied his strikes was different now too, more controlled, more precise. He didn't simply release energy, he weaponized it, shaping the explosions to maximize damage while minimizing waste. Each detonation carved through multiple Tyranids, the radiation itself evolving to bypass their adaptations. The swarm began to falter, not from casualties. They could replace losses indefinitely, but from something more fundamental. The hive mind's calculation engine was overloading. Garou was evolving faster than they could process, changing faster than they could adapt. For an organism whose entire existence was built on evolutionary superiority, this was incomprehensible. The final push came when Garou stopped holding back. His cosmic energy surged, no longer constrained, no longer measured. He tore through the swarm like a force of nature, each movement leaving devastation in its wake. Tyranids that came too close simply ceased to exist, their biomatter unable to withstand the concentrated radiation. And at the center of it all, surrounded by the corpses of 1,000 organisms, Garou felt something unexpected. Emptiness. The hive fleet withdrew. It was unprecedented. Tyranid fleets didn't retreat, they consumed, they adapted, they persisted until either they devoured everything or were completely annihilated. But the hive mind had made a calculation cold and logical. This target could not be consumed. The risk of corruption outweighed potential gains. Some of the organisms that had survived extended contact with Garou were showing anomalies. Mutations that didn't follow the hive mind's design, evolutionary dead ends that served no purpose. The fleet turned, seeking easier prey elsewhere in the galaxy. Garou watched them go, floating alone in a field of organic debris that stretched for thousands of kilometers. He had won the greatest battle since arriving in this universe, defeated an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations, proven that individual evolution could surpass collective adaptation. So why did it feel like failure? I wanted to be the monster that united the world against me, he said to the empty void, the absolute evil that forced everyone to stand together. But the Tyranids had run. Chaos had tried to recruit him. The Imperium worshipped him as a god. No one was uniting against him. They were either fleeing or kneeling or trying to claim him for themselves. His ideal, the pure vision of absolute evil, as a tool for creating true equality, was failing. Or worse, it was succeeding in ways he'd never intended. For the first time since the Zero Punch had thrown him into this universe, Cosmic Garou felt something approaching doubt. Not about his power that was absolute, undeniable, growing with each battle, but about his purpose. What good was evolution if it led only to isolation? What good was strength if no one could challenge it? What good was being the ultimate evil if the result was not unity, but fragmentation? He floated there, surrounded by the detritus of his victory, and felt more alone than he ever had. Light years away aboard the Righteous Vengeance, Kael Veritas added a new entry to his report. The entity has repelled a hive fleet through individual combat. Analysis of the engagement suggests power levels exceeding anything in Imperial records. The Tyranids organisms evolved for perfect predation, chose to retreat rather than continue engagement. I believe we are witnessing something without precedent, the emergence of a being that exists outside all known categories. Not chaos, not xenos, not even truly abomination. Simply a beyond. Emperor, help us if it decides to turn that power against Terra. Deep in the void, a signal reached out across the darkness. Ancient technology dormant for millennia, detecting the cosmic radiation signature that Garou emitted. On Tomb World, Sekhmet machines older than humanity stirred to life. Cryptek Sekhmet's ancient consciousness activated, analyzing the data his sensors provided. A source of infinite energy, a living organism that violated thermodynamics, a specimen worthy of study. The Necrons began preparing their trap. And Garou, drifting alone through the dark, sensed nothing of what awaited him. He was too focused on the hollow feeling in his chest, the growing realization that his ideal might be fundamentally flawed. That absolute evil pursued to its logical conclusion led not to unity but to godhood, and he had never wanted to be a god. The emptiness should have been familiar by now. Garou drifted through the void, the debris field from his battle with the Tyranids slowly dispersing behind him. His cosmic form pulsed with steady radiation, unchanged, undiminished. He had defeated a hive fleet, repelled an extinction-level threat through individual will alone. The victory meant nothing. He had wanted to force unity through fear. Instead, he'd watched his enemies either flee or try to claim him. The Imperium worshipped him. Chaos tried to recruit him. The Tyranids had simply left. No one was uniting against him. His ideal of absolute evil, the monster that would make the world stand together, was failing in ways he hadn't predicted, or succeeding in ways he'd never wanted. A signal cut through his thoughts, not psychic, not biological, but something older, mathematical, precise. A beam of energy that locked onto his cosmic signature with calculated efficiency. Before Garou could react, space itself bent around him. It wasn't like the warp's chaotic distortion. This was clean geometric, a manipulation of space-time according to principles that predated human civilization. The void twisted, folded, and suddenly Garou was moving not through thrust or momentum, but because the universe had been convinced he belonged somewhere else. A tractor beam, but not crude gravitational manipulation. This was reality itself being rewritten, one equation at a time. Garou didn't resist. Curiosity overrode caution. After the mindless swarm of Tyranids, after the emotional chaos of the warp, something that operated on pure logic intrigued him. The destination resolved below a world of black stone and silver metal, its surface carved into perfect geometric patterns that stretched from pole to pole. No atmosphere, no life, just cold mathematical precision made manifest. A tomb world. The landing was controlled, deliberate. Garou's feet touched necrodermis living metal that responded to his presence with microscopic adjustments, analyzing, cataloging. Around him, pyramidal structures rose in impossible angles, their surfaces etched with glyphs that hurt to look at directly. Then came the warriors. They emerged from dimensional pockets in the air itself, Gaou's weaponry materializing alongside their skeletal forms. Necron warriors, dozens of them, their empty eye sockets glowing with cold green light. They moved with mechanical precision, surrounding Garou in a perfect tactical formation. No war cries, no challenges, just the hum of ancient technology and the crackle of readied weapons. Garou studied them. They weren't like anything he'd faced before. Not organic like Tyranids, not emotion-driven like Chaos Daemons, not even zealous like the Space Marines. They were pure function tools designed for a single purpose, wielded by an intelligence he hadn't yet seen. The first warrior fired. The Gauss Flayer's beam struck Garou's chest, and he felt it, not pain, but systematic deconstruction. The weapon was stripping matter atom by atom, flaying existence itself down to base components. His cosmic radiation countered it, instinctively rebuilding what the Gauss energy destroyed. But the sensation was instructive. Garou moved. The water stream rock smashing fist, redirect enemy force, turn strength against itself. His hand swept the Gauss beam aside, sending it into another warrior. The target's torso disintegrated, and then reformed, necrodermis flowing like liquid metal, reconstructing the damaged form in seconds. Regeneration, Garou observed. Interesting. He tried the aggressive style copied from Khorne's demon. Closed the distance, struck with overwhelming force. His fist punched through the warrior's chest, shattering its core. The construct collapsed, then phased out of existence, teleporting back to whatever tomb complex housed its restoration protocols. The tyrannid predator instinct was useless. These weren't prey. They had no survival instinct to exploit, no fear to leverage. They simply executed their programming with machine efficiency. Garou's nuclear fission destroyed 5 warriors in a single detonation. Their bodies vaporized, reduced to constituent atoms. Within 30 seconds, 5 new warriors phased in to replace them. "You can't die," Garou said quietly. "Not really. Just reset, return, rebuild." He understood. These warriors weren't alive. Destroying them meant nothing, because they had already died millennia ago when they'd traded flesh for metal souls for immortality. What stood before him now were just echoes, copies, hollow shells executing ancient commands. The realization should have been tactical. Instead, it felt like looking into a mirror. Fascinating. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, synthesized from quantum vibrations in the air itself. The Necron warriors stopped their advance, freezing in perfect stillness. A figure materialized taller than the warriors, its form more elaborate. Robes of living metal flowed around a skeletal frame, and its eye sockets held not mindless light, but genuine intelligence. Ancient, calculating, curious. Cryptek Sekhmet, technomancer, master of the material sciences that had built an empire spanning the galaxy. "You emit energy that violates thermodynamics," Sekhmet said, its voice carrying none of the emotional inflection that characterized organic speech. "Self-sustaining, self-perpetuating, impossible according to natural law, yet you exist, magnificent." Garou met the Cryptek's gaze. "You want to study me? Add me to your collection. Use me as a power source." "Precisely. Your cooperation would be optimal, but not required." Sekhmet raised one skeletal hand. "You represent the solution to our greatest failure. The Necrontire sought immortality and received these hollow forms. But you are truly eternal. Flesh sustained by cosmic forces, if we can decode your nature. You could bring back your souls," Garou finished, "undo the biotransference, become truly alive again. You understand?" "I understand that you made a choice," Garou said. "You traded everything that made you who you were for the promise of forever. And now you're just machines pretending to be the people you used to be." Sekhmet tilted its head, a gesture borrowed from organic memory, meaningless now. "An interesting perspective, but incorrect. We are not pretending. We simply are. Consciousness without the weakness of flesh, existence without the limitation of mortality. Is this not evolution's ultimate goal? No. Garou's voice was flat. Evolution requires change, growth, adaptation. You're frozen, static. You can't grow because you've already achieved perfection. You can't change because you've eliminated the need to change. You're not evolved. You're extinct and too dead to know it. For a moment, something flickered in Sekhmet's eyes. Recognition, anger. It was impossible to tell. Then the cryptech activated its trap. Reality inverted. One moment, Garou stood on the tomb world surface. The next, he was somewhere else. A space that couldn't exist in 3 dimensions, folded and refolded like origami made from the universe itself. The Tesseract Labyrinth, a prison constructed from pure mathematics existing in dimensions the human mind couldn't process. Garou tried to move, found himself walking in circles that were also straight lines, tried to break through the walls, found them to be the absence of walls' boundaries, defined by nothing being there rather than something blocking the way. This wasn't a cage he could punch through. It was a logical paradox made physical. For the first time since arriving in this universe, Garou was truly trapped. He stopped trying to escape through force, started thinking instead. The Necrons had built this prison using the same principles that governed their own technology: dimensional manipulation, space-time folding, quantum uncertainty, harnessed and weaponized. If he wanted out, he needed to understand it, needed to learn it, needed to evolve. Garou sat down, or what passed for sitting in twisted space, and began to observe the way the dimensions bent, the patterns in the impossibility, the mathematics underlying the madness. And slowly, inevitably, he began to copy it. His cosmic form had always been adaptable, reactive. Now, he pushed that adaptation inward, restructuring his own nature at the fundamental level. If Necrodermis could self-repair through quantum reassembly, why couldn't he? He felt his body changing. Not growing, not strengthening, just reorganizing, becoming more efficient, more resilient, more like the very constructs that had captured him. It took what might have been hours or days' time. It didn't function properly in the labyrinth, but eventually Garou understood the prison's architecture well enough to exploit it. Nuclear fission, but not explosive force. Controlled collapse. He didn't attack the walls, he attacked the mathematical principles holding them in place. Introduced impossibilities into the equations, forced the Tesseract to resolve paradoxes it couldn't handle. Reality screamed, the labyrinth shattered. Garou stood once more on the tomb world's surface, his cosmic form subtly different. He could feel it, the new capability woven into his existence. If his body was damaged, it would reconstruct. If destroyed, it would reform. He had become functionally immortal, just like the Necrons. The realization made him pause. Osht. Sekhmet stood where Garou had left it, as if no time had passed. Perhaps none had from the cryptech's perspective. Impossible, it said. The Tesseract Labyrinth has held Cetan shards. Lesser gods have been trapped in its folds. You should not be able to. Garou moved. Faster than before, more efficient, incorporating the Necron's dimensional manipulation into his own movement. He appeared beside Sekhmet, palm already striking toward the cryptech's core. But Sekhmet phased out, teleporting 10 meters away. You learned from the prison, adapted its principles. You truly are a remarkable specimen. I'm not a specimen. Garou's voice was cold. And you're not going to study me. The cryptech raised both hands. The entire tomb world responded. Warriors phased in by the hundreds. Scarabs swarmed from beneath the surface. Monoliths rose from dimensional storage, their Gauss flux arcs charging. "Then you will be destroyed," Sekhmet said, "and I shall study your remains." Garou looked at the army arrayed against him, looked at the cryptech, this ancient intelligence housed in an immortal shell, desperately seeking to reclaim what it had lost, looked at the whole dead world, this monument to a civilization that had achieved eternal life and lost everything that made life worth living. He saw himself. If he kept evolving, kept adapting, kept becoming stronger, where would it end? Already he could regenerate like them. Already he was functionally immortal. Already he was losing touch with the purpose that had driven him, the ideal of absolute evil as a tool for unity. How long before he became just another hollow construct, powerful but empty, eternal but meaningless? "No," Garou said quietly, not to Sekhmet, to himself. "I won't become like you." His nuclear fission was different this time, not an explosion, a pulse, a wave of destabilizing energy that interfaced directly with Necron technology. He'd learned their principles, understood their systems, and now he attacked those systems at the conceptual level. The effect spread like a virus through the Tomb World's neural network. Warriors froze mid-advance, their programming corrupted. Monolith's weapons discharged randomly, the carefully maintained dimensional coordinates that kept the entire complex stable began to drift. Sekhmet staggered, its own systems affected. What have you done?" "Gave you what you wanted," Garou said. "Change, evolution. You were so static, so perfect, you forgot how to adapt. Let's see if you can remember." He walked toward the cryptech. Sekhmet tried to teleport but found its systems failing dimensional calculations, returning nonsense results. Garou's hand closed around the ancient construct's throat. "You're not alive," Garou said. "You're a recording of someone who used to be alive, a fossil pretending to be flesh. That's not evolution, that's just set." He released Sekhmet, turned away. Behind him, the Tomb World continued its collapsed systems, cascading into failure as the corruption spread. The cryptech would survive. Necrons were too redundant for this to kill it permanently. But it would take millennia to repair the damage, to rebuild the carefully balanced technology that maintained this dead monument. Garou left the Tomb World burning with cascading failures, and he didn't look back. In the void, drifting alone, Garou examined what he'd become. Stronger, more durable, functionally immortal. He'd integrated Necron technology into his own existence, become something that could survive almost anything. But at what cost? During his imprisonment in the Tesseract Labyrinth, in those timeless moments of forced stillness, he'd had time to think, to reflect, to see clearly what he was becoming. The Necrons had shown him his future. Not a warning, a preview. If he continued on this path, if he kept evolving and adapting and growing stronger, he would eventually become what they were: eternal, powerful, and completely hollow. All strength, no purpose. All capability, no meaning. A god in function, empty in essence. Absolute evil, he whispered to the void. I wanted to be the monster that forced the world to unite, the villain that created heroes through opposition. But I'm not creating unity. I'm creating worship, or fear, or retreat. I'm not their villain. I'm becoming their god. And gods, he realized with cold certainty, don't have purpose. They just are. For the first time since the Zero Punch had thrown him into this universe. Cosmic Garou felt something approaching despair. Not at his enemies, not at the universe's cruelty, but at himself, at the fundamental flaw in his ideal that he'd been too stubborn to see. Absolute evil couldn't force true unity. It could only force submission or retreat. The harder he tried to be the perfect monster, the more he became the very thing he'd always hated. False idol, worshipped by those too weak to stand alone, feared by those too broken to unite. His ideal was failing, or worse, it was succeeding exactly as intended, and the result was nothing like he'd hoped. Light years away, moving through the webway, with desperate purpose, Farseer Liandrel of Craft World, Oathway watched the skein of fate with growing alarm. She had tracked the cosmic abomination since its arrival, watched it destroy a hive world, reject chaos, repel tyrannids, escape Necron capture. Each event had been foreseen, calculated, measured against possible futures, and in every calculation, in every vision, the outcome was the same. If this being was not stopped, not redirected, not shown the truth of what it was becoming, it would ascend. Not through worship or ritual, but through sheer accumulation of power and purpose denied. It would become what it most hated, a god, the fifth chaos god. Or something worse, something outside the traditional paradigms, impossible to predict or contain. The Ngoi Sao Den walks toward his own damnation. Liandrel whispered, her psychic sight burning with the weight of foresight. He does not see it yet, but he will, soon. She closed her eyes, making a decision that might doom her craft world or save the galaxy. Prepare the webway gate. We must bring him here. Show him what he is becoming before it's too late. Before we have a god of despair to face alongside the four of chaos. The webway shimmered pathways, aligning coordinates, locking onto the cosmic signature that burned like a dark sun in the Imperium. Garou would have a visitor soon, and this time the truth would be unavoidable. Garou drifted through the void, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, he had no destination. Behind him, the Necron tomb world still burned with cascading system failures. Ahead, nothing. Just endless darkness and the weight of a realization he couldn't escape. He was becoming exactly what he'd always despised. The Imperium worshipped him. Chaos wanted to claim him. The Tyranids had fled rather than face him. The Necrons had shown him his future, an eternity of power without purpose, existence without meaning. Absolute evil. That's what he'd wanted to be. The monster so terrible that the world would have no choice but to unite against him. In his old universe, it had almost worked. Almost. Here it was failing in ways he hadn't anticipated, or succeeding in ways he'd never wanted. The webway gate appeared without warning. Not a tear in space like the warp, but a doorway that simply hadn't been there a moment before. Elegant, precise, ancient beyond measure. It pulsed with a light that was neither material nor immaterial, existing in the space between realities. An invitation. Garou stared at it. Every instinct told him it was a trap. But after the Necrons, after seeing what he was becoming, he found he didn't care. Perhaps whoever waited on the other side would finally give him a real answer, or a real fight, or just something other than this hollow victory after hollow victory he stepped through. The webway was nothing like the warp's chaos or real space's emptiness. Here passages stretched in impossible directions, their walls woven from crystallized thought and mathematics older than stars. The corridors shimmered with residual psychic energy, echoing with the footsteps of a civilization that had walked these paths when humanity was still learning to make fire. Garou walked deeper, his cosmic radiation painting the ancient walls in shades of death. Where his power touched the webway's structure, it recoiled slightly, not from damage, but from fundamental incompatibility. This place had been built by the old ones, maintained by the Eldari. It recognized him as foreign, as wrong. She was waiting where 3 passages converged into a chamber of crystalline geometry. Farseer Liandril of Craftworld Ulthwé stood motionless, her wraithbone armor catching non-existent light. Her psychic presence was controlled, contained nothing like the raw chaos of the warp or the cold logic of Necron technology. This was discipline refined over millennia, emotion bound by willpower, tempered by wisdom. She looked at Garou with eyes that had seen the galaxy's birth and death 1,000 times over. "You do not belong in this universe," she said. Not an accusation, a simple statement of fact. Garou met her gaze. "I know. Then why do you persist in trying to become something here? Why shape yourself according to this reality's rules when you are fundamentally outside them?" "Because," Garou said slowly, "I have a purpose, an ideal, absolute evil, the monster that forces unity through fear. It worked before, it can work again." Liandrel tilted her head slightly. "Can it? Let me show you something." The vision struck like a blade through his consciousness. Garou saw himself not as he was now, but as he would become. Sitting on a throne that existed in the warp but cast shadows across the Imperium. His cosmic form had grown vast, incomprehensible, no longer resembling anything that had once been human. Around him, billions knelt, cultists bearing his symbol, demons that served neither Horn nor Sinchich, nor Nurgle, nor Slaanesh, but him alone, worlds that had abandoned the Emperor's light and chaos's corruption to worship something else entirely. The 5th, the dark god of absolute evil. He watched himself grant blessings to the faithful, watched himself manifest in the Imperium through possessed hosts, watched himself wage war against the 4 not to destroy chaos, but to replace it, to become the new paradigm of corruption, the new false god for humanity to serve. And in that vision, sitting on that throne of conceptual darkness, he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, no purpose achieved, just hollow existence, power for its own sake, immortality without meaning. He had become exactly what he'd fought against: a false idol, a corrupt system, a lie wrapped in divine authority. The vision released him. Garou staggered, his cosmic form flickering. "No, that's not what I want. That's everything I hate." "I know," Liandril said quietly, "but it is what you're becoming. Every step you take down this path brings you closer to that throne. Every world you destroy, every faction that kneels or flees, every moment you grow stronger, all of it feeds the inevitable." "I don't want to be worshipped." The words tore from Garou like a scream. "I want them to stand up, to unite, to fight back." "Why would they?" Liandrel's question was gentle, almost sad. "You are too far beyond them. The gap between your power and theirs is not a challenge to overcome. It is an abyss that cannot be crossed. When you destroyed Calvesis, you did not create a villain for them to defeat. You became a natural disaster given form." She stepped closer, her psychic presence wrapping around the space between them. "Understand this: humanity does not fight natural disasters. They pray to them. They build religions around them. They seek to appease them, to understand them, to make them into something comprehensible through worship. You wanted to be absolute evil. But in this universe where there are literal gods born from worship, where faith shapes reality, where emotion becomes substance, your evil is indistinguishable from divinity. Garou's fists clenched. The cosmic energy around him surged, unstable, reflecting his inner turmoil. Then what should I have done? Let the Imperium continue crushing its own people. Let chaos corrupt everything. Let the Tyranids devour worlds. I'm not saying you were wrong to fight, Leandril said. I'm saying your purpose was flawed from its inception. You cannot force true unity through overwhelming fear. You can only force submission or retreat. And submission, given enough time and desperation, transforms into worship. She gestured and images appeared in the air between them, scattered across dozens of worlds, the cult of absolute evil spreading like infection. Men and women who had lost faith in the Emperor, who had rejected chaos, who saw in Garou's destruction a strange salvation. They call you the walking god, the destroyer, the liberator. Every name you reject, they invent a dozen more. Every declaration that you are not divine only proves your humility to them. You have become unfalsifiable. A god who denies his godhood is to them the truest god of all. Garou looked at the images, saw the desperation in those faces, saw them kneeling before crude idols carved in his likeness, saw them finding meaning in his meaningless violence. This is wrong, he said. All of it. I never wanted this. I know. Leandril's voice carried genuine sympathy. But wanting and becoming are not the same thing. The Chaos Gods did not want to be born. They simply emerged from humanity's excess. You did not want worship, but you created the conditions that made worship inevitable. Silence stretched between them. In that silence, Garou felt something he'd been avoiding since the moment the Zero Punch threw him into this universe. Doubt. Not about his strength, not about his power, but about the fundamental premise that had driven every action since he'd first decided to become the ultimate villain. What if his ideal was wrong? What if absolute evil as he understood it simply couldn't achieve what he wanted? What if the very concept was flawed, a solution to one universe's problems that became poison in another? What should I do? He asked. The question felt like defeat, like surrender. Like everything he'd ever stood for crumbling under the weight of an answer he didn't want. Leandril studied him for a long moment. That is not a question I can answer. The skein of fate shows many paths from this moment. In some you accept what you are becoming and ascend, becoming the fifth power, waging eternal war against chaos. In others, you reject it entirely and fade from this reality, returning to whatever void sent you here. And in others still, you find a third way. Something I cannot see clearly, something outside my ability to predict. But understand this, whatever you choose it soon. The longer you linger in this state, too powerful to challenge, too purposeless to satisfy, the more inevitable your apotheosis becomes. The galaxy itself is beginning to treat you as divine. That kind of collective belief has weight in this universe. Reality itself may soon have no choice but to make you what everyone believes you already are. The attack came without warning. A dozen howling banshees erupted from hidden passages, their power swords crackling. Dire avengers followed, shuriken catapults spitting monomolecular discs. Not an army, just a desperate squad that had decided Garou was too dangerous to leave alive, prophecy or not. They moved with perfect coordination, each warrior's actions flowing into the next. No wasted motion, no hesitation. This was the Eldari way of war violence, as art death, as poetry battle, as the ultimate expression of discipline and skill. Garou watched them come. He saw their patterns immediately, saw how they coordinated without speaking, anticipating each other's movements through centuries of training, saw the grace in their strikes, the economy of their footwork, the way they created openings and exploited weaknesses with surgical precision. They were beautiful in their way, and they were no threat to him whatsoever. His body moved before his mind fully engaged. The reflexes he'd developed, space marine precision, chaos, unpredictability, tyrannid predation, Necron efficiency, all combined into something that made the Eldari's elegance seem crude by comparison. But this time something was different. A howling banshee's power sword came for his throat. Instead of shattering her arm, Garou redirected it, gently, using the water stream technique not to destroy but to disarm. The warrior stumbled, confused, still alive. A dire avenger fired at point-blank range. Garou caught the shuriken discs mid-flight and let them fall harmlessly. The warrior froze, uncertain, expecting death that didn't come. One by one, Garou dismantled their assault without killing anyone, disabled weapons, disrupted formations, left them alive and confused, scattered across the chamber in various states of disarray. He could have killed them all in seconds. Should have, by every pattern he'd established since arriving in this universe. But he didn't want to. "Leave," he said quietly. "Tell whoever sent you that I'm not your enemy. I'm not anyone's enemy. I'm just..." He trailed off. What was he? Not a hero, not a villain, not a god, just a martial artist with cosmic power, lost in a universe that had no category for what he was trying to be. The Eldari warriors retreated, glancing back at him with expressions that mixed fear, confusion, and something that might have been pity. "You showed mercy," Leandrel observed. "Why?" Garou didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands, at the cosmic energy that swirled around them, powerful enough to crack planets. Thought about the Necrons who had that same power and lost everything that made power meaningful. "Because I'm tired," he finally said. "Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of watching people kneel when I want them to stand. Tired of winning battles that don't matter. I wanted to be absolute evil. The villain everyone could unite against. But you're right, I'm too far beyond them for that to work. They can't fight me. They can only worship or flee." He closed his fists. The energy around him pulsed, then stabilized. So maybe the ideal was wrong from the beginning. Maybe absolute evil can't force unity. Maybe all it does is force submission. And submission eventually becomes faith, and faith creates gods, Leandrel finished. "Yes, now you understand." "Then what do I do?" Garou asked again, more desperately this time. "If my purpose is flawed, if my ideal leads only to becoming what I hate, what's left? I can't go back to my universe. I'm trapped here. Do I just stop? Give up? Let myself fade away?" "That is one option." Leandrel's psychic presence intensified slightly. "But there is another. One I did not show you in the vision because it is uncertain, flickering, difficult to perceive." "What?" "Instead of trying to become a villain for this universe to unite against, become a villain that even the villains must unite against. Not absolute evil that replaces chaos, but something so fundamentally opposed to everything, so antithetical to all existing powers, that for the first time in 10,000 years, every faction has no choice but to cooperate." Garou stared at her. You're saying become worse, more destructive. I am saying transcend the categories entirely. Stop trying to fit into this universe's logic. You are not chaos, you are not Imperium, you are not any of the established powers. You are something outside something that threatens the very system itself. If you truly want to force unity, threaten not just worlds, but the fundamental order. Make yourself into something so dangerous that Imperium, Chaos, Xenos, all of them must work together or face extinction. Become not a god to worship, but a catastrophe to survive. The suggestion should have been horrifying. Instead, Garou felt something like recognition, like a path he'd been circling without seeing finally revealed itself. You're telling me to destroy everything. I'm telling you that if you want genuine unity, not submission, not worship, but true cooperation across all factions, you need to threaten something more fundamental than any single faction. Threaten the universe itself. Leandrel's expression was unreadable. It will not save you. You will still become a monster in the end. But at least you will be the monster you intended, one that creates unity through opposition, not through inadvertent deification. Of course, she added, this path leads only to your own destruction. Once the galaxy unites against you, once every power turns its full might toward your elimination, you will fall. Even you cannot stand against all of reality working in concert. But perhaps that is what you wanted all along, to create something worth dying for. Garou felt his cosmic energy surge, then collapse, then surge again. Unstable, uncertain. He had come into this webway questioning his purpose. Now he was being offered a choice between damnation and annihilation. Between becoming a god or becoming a sacrifice. Part of him wanted to reject it all, to turn away from this insane universe and its impossible choices, to find some way back to his own reality where his ideal at least made sense. But he couldn't. The zero punch had been final. There was no going back, only forward, into whatever he chose to become. I need to think, he said finally. You have very little time, Leandrel warned. The galaxy is already mobilizing. Inquisitor Kael Veritas has sent word to Terra. The High Lords are convening. Chaos is watching. The Necrons are calculating. Even the Tyranids are reconsidering. Soon they will all move against you simultaneously, whether you want them to or not. Then let them come. Garou's voice was hollow. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe I don't get to choose. Maybe the choice has already been made. He turned to leave the webway, but his cosmic energy was too unstable. It lashed out uncontrolled, striking the ancient walls. The webway structure cracked not deeply, not catastrophically, but enough. Enough to send shockwaves through the entire network. Enough to threaten the pathways that kept Komorach separate from the warp. No! Leandrel raised her hands, psychic power flaring as she stabilized the breach. Do you see, even your moments of weakness threaten billions? This is what you have become, a walking apocalypse that endangers existence by simply existing. Garou looked at the cracks he'd caused, looked at Leandrel straining to hold reality together, looked at his own hands glowing with power he hadn't meant to unleash. I'm losing control, he whispered. Not of my strength, of myself. The more I evolve, the less human I become. The Necrons showed me that. You showed me that. Every battle makes me stronger and emptier. He pulled his power back, forced it under control through sheer will. The cracks stopped spreading, though they didn't heal. "I'll leave," he said, "before I destroy more. Thank you for the warning, for the vision, for trying to help even though I'm the enemy of everything you know." "You are not our enemy," Leandril said quietly, her psychic strain evident. "You are something far more dangerous. You are a question without an answer, a problem without a solution, a power that exists outside all categories. Perhaps that is why the universe fears you more than it fears chaos." Garou stepped back into the void, leaving the webway behind. Behind him, Leandril collapsed slightly, the effort of maintaining the breach finally taking its toll. She would survive. The webway would hold. But the warning had been delivered. The choice had been laid bare. Floating alone in the dark between stars, Garou felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. The Imperium's worship, Chaos's hunger, the Tyranids' retreat, the Necron's emptiness, the Eldari's prophecy. Every faction had shown him a different mirror. Every battle had stripped away another layer of certainty. Now he stood at the center of it all, more powerful than ever and more lost than he'd ever been. Absolute evil. The ideal that had driven him, that had given him purpose, that had made him believe he could force a better world through fear. It was breaking, crumbling, revealing itself as the hollow thing it had always been. And soon, very soon, he would have to decide what to build from the ruins. But for now, in this moment of stillness between revelations, Cosmic Garou allowed himself something he hadn't permitted since arriving in this universe: uncertainty. And in the void, it felt almost like relief. Light years away, in the heart of Terra itself, the High Lords of the Imperium convened in emergency session. Inquisitor Kael Veritas presented his findings reports of an entity beyond classification, beyond containment, beyond reason. In the warp, the four gathered as they rarely did, their attention focused on a single point in the materium. In the depths of space, Hive fleets calculated probabilities and reconsidered previous retreat protocols. On tomb worlds, across the galaxy, Necron overlords stirred from their slumber, ancient protocols activating. And in the webway Farseer, Leandril sent a single message across the psychic network, reaching every craft world, every exodite world, every fragment of the Eldari people. The Dark Star walks toward his final choice. When he makes it, we must be ready. For what comes next will reshape the galaxy for better or for worse. The countdown had begun, and Garou, drifting alone in his self-imposed exile, felt the weight of infinity pressing down on his shoulders. Soon he would have to answer the question he'd been avoiding since the moment he arrived in this cursed universe. Who was Cosmic Garou, if not absolute evil? And when he found that answer, nothing would ever be the same. In the void between stars, Cosmic Garou made his choice. He had seen the future. Leandril showed him the dark throne, the hollow worship, the eternity of meaningless power. He had heard her warning that trying to force unity through overwhelming evil would only create another false god. She was right. His ideal had been flawed from the beginning. But there was still one truth she hadn't fully grasped. If the galaxy would not unite against him as a monster, then he would make them unite against him as a god, not through worship, but through terror so absolute that even gods would tremble. He would become the catastrophe that transcended all categories, the threat so fundamental that Imperium, Chaos, and Xenos alike had no choice but to cooperate or perish. And when it was done, when they stood together, even for just one moment, he would accept what came after. Garou turned toward the heart of the Imperium, toward Segmentum Solar, toward Terra itself, where the corpse emperor sat on his golden throne, sustained by 1,000 souls sacrificed daily. If he was going to force the galaxy's hand, he would do it at the center of everything. His cosmic form blazed like a dark star as he began to move. The emergency convocation had never happened before in 10,000 years of Imperial history. Inquisitor Kael Veritas stood in the strategium of the righteous vengeance, now part of a fleet so vast it defied comprehension. Battleships from a dozen sectors, Titan-bearing transports, Space Marine strike cruisers representing chapters that had been at war with each other mere weeks ago. And that was just the Imperium's contribution. Through the main viewport, Kyle could see the impossible, a Necron tomb ship holding position alongside an Ultramarine's battle barge. Eldar craft-world vessels emerging from the webway in perfect formation. Even the warp itself was wrong. Demons manifested on the edge of real space, not attacking, but waiting. "This cannot be real," Captain Theron whispered beside him. "It is," Kale said. "We're witnessing what no one thought possible, a galaxy united." Against what? Kale's augmetic eye focused on the readings from the outer sensors. A cosmic signature approaching at impossible speed, growing stronger with each passing moment. Against him. The bridge fell silent as every augur began screaming warnings simultaneously. Energy readings that broke measurement scales. Radiation levels that made previous encounters look like candle flames. A presence so overwhelming that even the non-psychers felt it pressing against their minds. Garou had arrived. Why, he appeared not with stealth or strategy, but as a statement. One moment empty space, the next a figure wreathed in cosmic fire stood before the assembled might of the galaxy. No ship, no armor, just himself, a being that should not exist, could not exist by any natural law, yet did. The fleets trained every weapon on him. Macro cannons, lance batteries, Gauss flares, shuriken cannons, psychic lances, even the tendrils of the Tyranid hive fleet now approaching from the system's edge. Garou looked at them all, at the Imperium's golden eagles, at the chaos symbols painted on corrupted hulls, at the Necron death marks, at the Eldar runes, at the living horror of the Tyranid bioships, every enemy he'd faced, every faction he'd challenged, all of them standing together united by the simple fact of his existence. This was what he'd wanted, what he'd fought for, what he'd destroyed worlds to achieve, and it had cost him everything. "I am absolute evil." The words carried across the void, transmitted through Vox channels and psychic frequencies and quantum entanglement. 4 simple words that held the weight of his entire journey, his corrupted ideal, his inevitable fate. Not a boast, not a challenge, an acceptance. The galaxy opened fire. The first wave was pure Imperium. Lance strikes that could carve through fortress walls converged on Garou's position. Macro shells the size of hab blocks. Virus bombs capable of killing worlds. The full fury of humanity's war machine refined over 10 millennia of endless conflict. Garou moved through it like water through a broken dam. The water stream rock smashing fist Master Bang's technique, perfected and transcended, redirected the lance strikes into each other, created cascading explosions that consumed the very firepower meant to kill him. Macro shells were caught mid-flight and hurled back, punching through the armor of the ships that fired them. But the Imperium had numbers. For every ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. The barrage intensified, Titan-class weapons firing in concert, cyclonic torpedoes leaving trails of devastation. Garou's nuclear fission answered them. Not a single explosion, but a chain reaction, dozens of miniature stars blossoming across the battlefield. Each one precisely calculated to maximize destruction while conserving energy. Ships vaporized, void shields collapsed, entire formations reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Yet, they kept coming. Space Marines launched boarding torpedoes, not at Garou directly, but at positions around him, creating a net of adamantium and faith. Tech priests activated ancient technologies pulled from STCs older than the Imperium itself. Inquisitors invoked the Emperor's name, their faith made manifest in golden light. And for the first time since arriving in this universe, Garou felt something approaching respect. They were not worshipping, not kneeling, not fleeing. They were fighting. The warp tore open across 1,000 points. Demons poured through, not in the mindless hordes Garou had seen before, but in coordinated legions. Bloodthirsters led cornate warriors in disciplined charges. Lords of Change wove probability-warping sorceries. Great unclean ones spread plagues that ate through reality itself. Keepers of secrets moved with hypnotic grace, their very presence corrupting the battlefield's geometry. And behind them, the presence of the Four themselves, not manifested fully, but close enough that space itself began to reject their existence. Garou fought them all. The aggressive style copied from Khorne let him meet the Bloodthirsters head-on, matching their fury with controlled violence. The unpredictable adaptation from Tzeentch allowed him to counter every sorcery, every probability manipulation. The predatory instinct from Tyranids let him find weaknesses in formations that seemed perfect. The reconstruction capability from Necrons meant that even mortal wounds healed in seconds. He had become the synthesis of everything the galaxy could produce, every style, every technique, every power he'd encountered, all of it flowing together in seamless, terrible perfection. But even perfection had limits. A bloodthirster's axe caught him across the chest, drawing cosmic blood for the first time. A Lord of Change's spell collapsed reality around him, forcing him to reconstitute his form. A great unclean one's touch left corruption that took precious seconds to purge. They were hurting him. Not much, not enough to stop him, but enough to prove that he could be hurt. The Necron tomb ships phased into real space with mathematical precision. Their Gauss weapons fired in perfect synchronization, billions of calculations executed instantaneously to create a web of disintegration beams that left no gaps, no escape routes. Simultaneously, Cryptex activated dimensional anchors technology designed to trap Cetan shards, attempting to lock Garou in place. The Eldar craft worlds followed, emerging from the webway like vengeful ghosts. Their weapons sang with psychic resonance, targeting not Garou's body, but his existence itself. Farseers linked their minds, creating a gestalt consciousness that saw all possible futures, and chose the paths that led to his defeat. And finally, almost reluctantly, the Tyranid Hive fleet arrived. The shadow in the warp descended like a suffocating blanket, crushing psychic phenomena, silencing the voices of gods and demons alike. Bioships the size of moons disgorged their payloads, not to consume this time, but to destroy. Carnifexes and hive tyrants, bred specifically as Garou killers, their genetics engineered from the data collected during their previous encounter. The entire galaxy had turned its weapons on a single target. and that target stood alone against them all. Garou's cosmic energy flared unstable, pushed beyond limits he'd thought absolute. Nuclear fission erupted continuously, creating a sphere of devastation that consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers. His body blurred between forms, now solid, now ethereal, now something in between, as he adapted to each new threat faster than they could adjust. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was invincible and dying. He was transcendent and breaking, but he was also smiling. Not with joy, not with satisfaction, but with understanding. This was it. This was what he'd wanted since the moment he'd chosen to become evil incarnate. Not worship, not submission, not fear disguised as reverence, just honest, desperate, unified resistance. They were fighting together. Imperium and chaos, Necrons and Tyranids, Eldar and humanity, all the ancient hatreds, all the eternal wars set aside for just this moment because the alternative was extinction. He had forced them to unite, and now he would give them the enemy they deserved. Garou gathered his power. Every technique he'd mastered, every ability he'd copied, every evolution he'd achieved, all of it compressed, concentrated, refined into a single point of absolute destruction. This would be his final statement, the ultimate expression of everything he'd become. The gamma ray burst. In his original universe, he had glimpsed this technique from God's knowledge, the ability to recreate one of the universe's most violent phenomena, a beam of energy so intense it could sterilize planets from light years away, so focused it could pierce the fabric of reality itself. He had saved it, held it in reserve, waiting for the moment when nothing else would suffice. That moment had come. "You wanted to see a god," Garou said, his voice carrying across every channel, every frequency, every dimension. "Let me show you what divine wrath truly means." His cosmic form blazed white-hot, then beyond white, into colors that had no names. The nuclear fission that had been his signature weapon merged with something far greater: stellar-level fusion, quantum-level manipulation. The fundamental forces of the universe bent to a single purpose, creating a beam of pure annihilation. The gamma ray burst erupted from Garou's outstretched hands. It was not fire, not plasma, not even conventional energy. It was the stuff of cosmic catastrophes given direction and intent. The beam cut through space itself, leaving a scar in reality that would take millennia to heal. Everything in its path ceased to exist. Imperium ships gone, not destroyed, but simply removed from existence. Demon hordes unmade, their essence scattered beyond even the warp's ability to reclaim. Necron tomb ships, their living metal, unable to regenerate from complete atomic dissolution. Tyranid bioforms, their adaptations meaningless against a force that redefined the laws of physics. The beam swept across the battlefield like the scythe of a malevolent god. Hundreds of ships, thousands, millions of lives, entire fleets that had survived 10,000 years of warfare gone in seconds. And then, because the universe itself could not contain such power, indefinitely, the gamma ray burst began to warp space-time. The boundary between real space and the warp fractured, impossible geometries manifested. Physical laws became suggestions, the segmentum solar. The heart of the Imperium, the cradle of humanity, began to tear itself apart under the strain of energies never meant to exist in the materium. From Terra, astropaths screamed in unison. The golden throne flickered. For just a moment, the Emperor's psychic presence wavered, drawn toward the cosmic maelstrom Garou had created. Inquisitor Cael Veritas watched from the righteous vengeance, somehow spared by sheer chance of positioning, and understood what he was witnessing. Not a battle, not even a war, the birth of a god. Garou felt it happening. The warp was pulling at him. Not the four, they were recoiling, afraid of what he'd become. But the warp itself, reality's collective unconscious, was trying to find a category for him. A place to put something that transcended all existing classifications. And in the absence of any appropriate category, it was creating a new one. He could fight it, could resist, could hold on to the last shreds of what he'd been, a martial artist from another universe, pursuing a flawed ideal with absolute conviction. But what would be the point? He'd achieved his goal, made the galaxy unite, even if just for a moment, proven that absolute evil could force cooperation through sheer, overwhelming threat. And now, the price was due. Garou stopped resisting. The transformation was not sudden, not a flash of apotheosis, just a gradual dissolution of everything that made him individual. His memories becoming mythology, his personality becoming archetype, his body becoming concept. The cosmic form that had been Garou expanded, stretched, merged with the torn fabric of reality. The warp embraced him not as corruption, but as definition. He was becoming what everyone had always seen him as, what he'd always been destined to become in this universe of faith made real. A god, not of any traditional domain, not of war or change or decay or excess, but of absolute evil itself. The dark god who stood apart from the four, the fifth power that would forever haunt the galaxy's nightmares. In his final moments of true consciousness, Garou felt everything. The fear of trillions, the desperate prayers of those who thought he might hear them, the hatred of those who would spend eternity trying to destroy him, the awe of those who could not comprehend what he'd become. And underneath it all, a hollow ache. He'd wanted to be the villain everyone could unite against. And he'd succeeded. But the victory felt like the emptiest thing in all existence. When the light faded, when the gamma ray burst finally exhausted itself, when space-time began its slow process of healing, Garou was gone. In his place, visible to psychers and seers across the galaxy, a new presence in the warp. A throne of absolute darkness set apart from the brass throne of Korn, the maze of Zinch, the garden of Nurgle, the palace of Slaanesh, and on that throne, something that had once been human, once been a martial artist, once been a boy who'd wanted to create a better world through becoming its greatest monster. Now just power, presence, concept made manifest, the galaxy's fifth god. The fleets began to withdraw. Without Garou to unite against the Alliance, dissolved instantly. Imperium ships turned their weapons on Chaos vessels. Necron tomb ships prepared to continue their harvest. Tyranids returned to their endless hunger. Eldar craft worlds vanished back into the webway, as if it had never happened. But Inquisitor Cael Veritas knew better. He'd witnessed the impossible. He'd seen eternal enemies fight side by side. He'd watched the galaxy stand as one, even if just for a handful of hours. His final report would be sealed in the deepest archives of the Inquisition, classified beyond even High Lord's access. too dangerous to become public knowledge, too important to be destroyed. The abomination designated cosmic Garou no longer exists in the Imperium. In its place, a fifth presence has manifested in the Imperium, neither aligned with nor subservient to the traditional ruinous powers. The entity appears to embody the concept of absolute evil, a force that exists solely to oppose, to destroy, to challenge all established order. It is worshipped by a growing cult of extremists who reject both the Emperor and chaos. But I must note one final observation that troubles me more than the entity's existence. For the first time in Imperial history, we fought alongside our enemies. Chaos and Imperium, Xenos and humanity, the ancient grudges, the eternal wars, all set aside to face a common threat. We proved it is possible. That unity, however brief may be the abomination's true legacy. I do not know if this knowledge makes us stronger or reveals a weakness that will be our undoing. May the Emperor guide us in the dark times ahead. Kyle sealed the report, uploaded it to the astropathic relay, and waited for the return of normalcy, which meant the return of war. In the warp, on a throne that would come to be called the seat of absolute evil, the being that had been Garou existed in a state beyond life or death. No thoughts, no emotions, no purpose, just the pure concept of opposition, of evil so fundamental that it transcended morality itself. The dark mirror to all that claimed righteousness, the void that consumed false idols, the silence that answered false prayers. Cultists across the galaxy would come to worship this entity, would call it Liberator, Destroyer, the Dark Star, the Fifth Terror, the walking apocalypse given divine form. They would be wrong. It was simply what Garou had always been, a martial artist who wanted to make the world better by becoming its greatest villain, and who had succeeded so completely that he'd ceased to be himself at all. The galaxy continued its eternal cycle of war. Imperium against chaos, humanity against Xenos, order against entropy, light against darkness. But something had changed. Some fundamental truth had been revealed, that when pushed far enough, when threatened, absolutely even eternal enemies could stand together. It would be forgotten quickly, of course, buried under layers of propaganda and theological revision. The galaxy was too broken, too corrupted, too far gone to truly change. But for those who had been there, who had witnessed the impossible unity, who had fought side by side with those they'd been taught to hate, they would remember. And in the darkest nights, when the wars seemed endless and victory impossible, they would think of that moment and wonder what might have been if only they could have held on to it. But that was the nature of Warhammer 40,000. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Even gods could not change that. Even absolute evil could not force lasting peace. All they could do was reveal for one shining moment what unity might look like, before the darkness returned, as it always did, as it always would, forever.